The lecture hall at the prestigious Galactic Academy buzzed with the intellectual elite of over a dozen alien species. Professor Xyloth, a renowned Novellian expert on ancient precursor civilizations, stood at the podium, his iridescent tentacles gesturing animatedly. "The precursors," Xyloth said, his deep voice resonating through the amphitheater, "were the most technologically advanced race the galaxy has ever known. Yet, for all their power, they left behind many unsolved mysteries, including this." With a wave of his tentacle, Xyloth projected a complex geometric diagram onto the towering view screen behind him. Intricate lines and shapes intertwined in a dizzying pattern, defying simple comprehension. "This is the enigma of the ancients," Xyloth continued, "a puzzle that has stumped the greatest minds for millennia. It is believed to hold the key to unlocking secrets about the precursors' origins, their technology, even the very nature of the cosmos. And yet, despite centuries of study, no one has been able to solve it." The professor paused, his cavernous black eyes sweeping the room. Dozens of bright, curious gazes stared back. Novellians, Grells, Rakshians, Venliri, and more, the academic elite of the known galaxy. All except one. In the back row, a lone human hand shot up, the fingers slim and pale against the sea of vibrant alien appendages. Xyloth's tentacles twitched in surprise. "You there, in the back," he said, pointing a thick digit at the young woman. "Do you have a question?" The other students turned, murmuring in surprise and curiosity. Humans were a rarity at the Galactic Academy, their home planet labelled a Deathworld by the more advanced civilizations. This one, with her dark hair and sharp features, looked impossibly young to be enrolled here. The woman rose, drawing every eye in the room. "Professor Xyloth," she said, her voice clear and confident, "I believe I can solve the enigma of the ancients." A collective gasp rippled through the hall. Xyloth's tentacles twitched again, his face contorting in a mix of shock and offense. "Young lady, do you realize what you're saying?" he rumbled. "This is a puzzle that has stumped the greatest minds in the galaxy. What makes you think a mere human could solve it?" The woman met his gaze evenly. "I'm Sarah Chen, and on my homeworld, we solve puzzles like this as children. Please, allow me to demonstrate." Xyloth hesitated, then let out a long, exasperated sigh. "Very well, if you insist. Come up and have a try." As Sarah walked down the aisle, whispers and stares followed her. The other students exchanged dubious glances, their expressions ranging from amusement to outright disdain. A Grell professor in the front row leaned over to Xyloth. "You're really going to let this, human, waste our time?" he hissed. "This is an exercise for the finest academic minds, not some primitive upstart." Xyloth waved a tentacle dismissively. "Peace, Xyloth. Let the girl have her chance. It will only take a moment to put her in her place." Sarah reached the podium, gazing up at the towering view screen. Her eyes narrowed as she studied the intricate diagram, her mind already racing. Then, without hesitation, she began tracing the lines with her finger, muttering under her breath. Xyloth and the other professors watched in stunned silence, their expressions shifting from derision to growing unease. Seconds ticked by, then minutes, and still Sarah continued, her movements growing more confident, her brow furrowing in concentration. Finally, after nearly an hour, she stepped back, a triumphant smile spreading across her face. "I've solved it," she announced, her voice ringing out in the hushed hall. "The enigma of the ancients." The professors erupted in outraged protests, their tentacles flailing, but Sarah ignored them, her gaze fixed on Xyloth. "If you'd allow me to explain," she began. But the Novellian professor held up a hand, his black eyes narrowed to slits. "Explain. Explain how a mere human has accomplished what our finest scholars could not." Siloth's voice dripped with disdain. "No, I think it is time we had a little chat in my office." With that, he turned and swept out of the lecture hall, leaving Sarah alone on the stage, surrounded by a sea of bewildered and resentful alien faces. Sarah followed Professor Siloth in silence, her steps measured and her expression unreadable. The Novellian's long, sinuous strides betrayed his agitation as he led her through the winding corridors of the Galactic Academy. Their footsteps echoed against the polished floors and towering windows, the breathtaking vista of Siloth's home planet visible in the distance. But Sarah's gaze remained fixed ahead, unfazed by the grandeur that surrounded them. At last, they arrived at a massive set of ornate doors. Siloth punched a code into a keypad, and the doors slid open to reveal his private office, a sprawling chamber adorned with ancient precursor artifacts and teeming with state-of-the-art holographic displays. The professor gestured for Sarah to enter, then sealed the doors behind them. His tentacles twitched with barely contained frustration as he moved to stand behind his imposing desk. "Well, young lady," he rumbled, fixing Sarah with his piercing black eyes, "you've certainly made quite an impression today." Sarah inclined her head slightly. "I merely wish to demonstrate my abilities, Professor. As I said, on my homeworld, we solve puzzles like the enigma of the ancients from a young age." Siloth let out a derisive snort. "Your homeworld? This Earth you hail from?" "Yes, I'm familiar with the reports. A primitive backwater planet, teeming with violence and instability. Hardly the kind of place one would expect to produce a mind capable of unraveling one of the greatest mysteries in the galaxy." He leaned forward, his tentacles curling menacingly. "So tell me, Sarah Chen, what is your game? Are you some kind of spy sent to infiltrate our hallowed halls? Or perhaps you're part of some nefarious plot to undermine the galactic order?" Sarah met his gaze steadily. "I assure you, Professor, I have no such motives. I am simply a student, eager to learn and expand my understanding of the universe. My people may be young, but we possess a drive and adaptability that has allowed us to overcome many challenges. The enigma of the ancients was merely the latest in a long line of puzzles I've solved." Siloth's eyes narrowed to slits. "Overcome challenges, you say? Interesting choice of words. Tell me, do these challenges on your homeworld often involve violence?" Sarah hesitated, then nodded. "I won't deny that Earth has its share of conflict, but we've also made great strides in science, technology, and philosophy. We're a young species, but we're learning and growing rapidly." Humph. Siloth leaned back in his chair, his tentacles twitching. "Be that as it may, your little display in the lecture hall has raised some concerning questions that I intend to get to the bottom of." He fixed Sarah with a stern look. "You will remain here, under my supervision, until I'm satisfied that you pose no threat to the Galactic Academy or the greater order of our civilization. Is that understood?" Sarah opened her mouth to protest, then seemed to think better of it. "I understand, Professor. I'm happy to cooperate in any way I can." Kirigloth nodded, his expression unreadable. "Good. Then let us begin." He tapped a command into his desk, and the room was plunged into darkness. Suddenly, a series of holographic displays flickered to life, each one presenting a different complex puzzle or riddle. "These," Siloth announced, "are some of the greatest intellectual challenges our civilization has to offer. If you are truly the prodigy you claim to be, then you will have no trouble solving them. One by one, if you please. Sarah's gaze flicked from display to display, her mind already racing. Without a word, she stepped forward and began to work, her fingers tracing the holographic interfaces with practiced ease. Scyloth leaned back in his chair, his tentacles twitching with a mixture of fascination and trepidation. Whatever happened next, he was certain of one thing. This human girl was about to turn his world upside down. The holographic displays flickered and shifted, each one presenting a new challenge for Sarah to confront. Scyloth watched in rapt silence, his tentacles twitching with barely contained anticipation. One by one, Sarah approached each puzzle, her brow furrowed in concentration. Her fingers danced across the interfaces, her mind racing as she methodically worked through the layers of complexity. Seconds ticked by, then minutes, and still she showed no sign of faltering. Scyloth's eyes widened as she systematically dismantled challenge after challenge, her solutions flowing with an effortless logic that belied her youth and humble origins. At last, with a final flourish, Sarah stepped back from the last display, a small smile playing at the corners of her lips. "There," she said, turning to face the awestruck professor. "I believe I've solved all of your puzzles, Professor Scyloth." Scyloth stared at her, his tentacles frozen in stunned silence. Then, with a low, rumbling growl, he surged to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor behind him. "Impossible!" he roared, his voice echoing off the chamber's high ceilings. "These are the most complex intellectual challenges our civilization has to offer, puzzles that have stumped the greatest minds for generations. And you, a mere human child, solved them all in the span of an hour." Sarah regarded him calmly. "As I said, Professor, puzzles like these are child's play on my homeworld. We face challenges of a far more immediate nature. This was merely an exercise in applied logic and reasoning." Scyloth's black eyes narrowed to slits. "Applied logic and reasoning, you say?" He leaned forward, his tentacles writhing. "Then perhaps you would not mind demonstrating your skills in a more physical arena." Sarah blinked, her brow furrowing in confusion. "Physical arena? I'm not sure I understand." "Combat, girl." Scyloth spat, his voice dripping with contempt. "If your people are so adept at overcoming challenges, then surely you must be trained in the martial arts as well. Or are you merely a mind without a body, a thinker without the means to defend yourself?" Sarah hesitated, a flicker of unease crossing her features. "Professor, I don't believe." "Enough!" Scyloth thundered, cutting her off. "You will face one of our most skilled warriors in the Academy's training grounds. If you can best them, then perhaps I will be convinced of your so-called abilities." He gestured to the door, his tentacles curling in a menacing gesture. "Now let us see what you're truly made of, human." Sarah held Scyloth's gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "Very well, Professor. I accept your challenge." As she turned and headed for the exit, Scyloth's lips curled in a cruel smile. This human upstart would soon learn the true measure of her worth. No matter how brilliant her mind might be, she was still just a fragile, primitive creature, and in the end, raw intellect would mean nothing against the superior strength and skill of a galactic warrior. The professor's smile widened as he followed Sarah out the door, already picturing the humiliation that awaited her. News of the impending match spread quickly through the academy, and soon a crowd of curious students and professors had gathered in the training grounds. Scyloth stood at the edge of the arena, his black eyes glinting with anticipation. Across the field, Sarah stood facing her opponent, a towering Grell warrior, his bulging muscles rippling beneath scales that shimmered like polished obsidian. The alien warrior regarded the human with open contempt, his razor-sharp fangs bared in a menacing grin. The signal to begin the match sounded, and the Grell lunged forward, his massive fists swinging in a blur of devastating blows. But to the shock of the onlookers, Sarah darted and weaved with unnatural agility, her slender frame effortlessly evading the onslaught. Siloth's tentacles twitched in disbelief as the human girl danced around her hulking opponent, her movements fluid and graceful. Whenever the Grell seemed to gain the upper hand, Sarah would slip free, her counterattacks striking with precision and force that belied her delicate frame. Minutes ticked by, and still the match raged on, the Grell's roars of frustration echoing across the arena. Siloth's earlier confidence had slowly given way to a growing sense of unease. This human, she was no mere thinker. She was a true warrior, her body honed to the same preternatural standard as her mind. And the implications of that realization sent a chill down the professor's tentacles. As Sarah landed the final blow, sending the battered Grell crashing to the ground, the stunned silence of the onlookers was broken by a single ominous question. What else is she capable of? The stunned silence that followed Sarah's victory was palpable. The Grell warrior, his massive frame battered and bruised, stared up at the human girl in disbelief. Around the arena, the assembled students and professors exchanged bewildered glances, their faces etched with a mix of awe and unease. Siloth stepped forward, his tentacles twitching with a barely contained rage. Impossible, he growled, his deep voice rumbling through the hushed training grounds. This cannot be. Sarah met his gaze evenly, her expression calm and composed. I told you, Professor, that we face challenges of a more immediate nature on my homeworld. The skills you see before you are the result of a lifetime of honing both mind and body. Siloth's black eyes narrowed to slits. A lifetime? But you are barely more than a child. He swept his gaze across the onlooking crowd, his tentacles flaring in agitation. This human is an anomaly, a freak of nature. There must be some explanation, some secret she's hiding from us. He turned back to Sarah, his voice dropping to a menacing rumble. You will come with me, now. Sarah hesitated, her brow furrowing slightly. Professor, I don't understand. I've done nothing wrong. Surely we can discuss this. Discuss. Siloth interrupted, his tentacles lashing the air. There is nothing to discuss. You have shown abilities that defy all logic and reason. You are a threat to the very fabric of our civilization, and I will not allow you to roam freely within these halls. He gestured to two burly Rakian guards, who immediately stepped forward and seized Sarah by the arms. The young woman let out a startled cry as they dragged her away, her protests echoing across the stunned arena. Take her to the detention center, Siloth ordered, his voice cold and implacable. I will summon the council immediately. We must get to the bottom of this human anomaly. As the guards hauled Sarah from the training grounds, the whispers and murmurs of the onlookers grew to a dull roar. Siloth stood alone, his tentacles curled tight against his body, his mind racing with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. This human girl was a threat, of that much he was certain. Her intellect and physical prowess were beyond anything the Galactic Academy had ever seen, abilities that could not be allowed to run unchecked. And yet, a tiny traitorous part of Siloth's mind couldn't help but feel a twinge of fascination. What was the true extent of Sarah's capabilities? What secrets did her primitive homeworld hold? Could she unlock mysteries about the precursors and the very nature of the cosmos that had eluded the greatest minds of the galactic order. Psylocke let out a frustrated growl, shaking his head. No, he could not afford to entertain such thoughts. This human was a dangerous anomaly, and she must be contained before she could upset the delicate balance of power that had held the galaxy together for millennia. As the professor strode towards the council chambers, his tentacles twitching with purpose, a single ominous question echoed through his mind. What would the Galactic Council make of Sarah Chen? In the dimly lit detention center, Sarah paced the confines of her cell, her brow furrowed in a mix of confusion and concern. She had expected Psylocke to be suspicious of her abilities, but his outright hostility and fear had caught her off guard. "I didn't mean to cause any trouble," she muttered to herself, her fingers absently tracing the smooth metallic walls. "I was just trying to learn, to understand this new world. Why are they so threatened by me?" A soft hiss drew her attention to the cell door, where a slender, violet-skinned Venluri guard stood watching her with narrowed eyes. "The council will be arriving shortly," the guard said, her voice clipped and formal. "I suggest you prepare yourself, human. They will have many questions for you." Sarah nodded, her expression grave. "I'm ready. I have nothing to hide." As the guard turned and walked away, Sarah let out a heavy sigh, her gaze drifting to the small viewport that offered a tantalizing glimpse of the Academy's sprawling campus beyond her cell. "I hope you're right, me," she murmured. "Because if I can't convince the Council of my intentions, I fear my time here may be cut very short." The Galactic Council chamber was an imposing sight, a vast circular hall dominated by a towering holographic display that showed a three-dimensional map of the known galaxy. Reining the chamber were dozens of elevated seats, each one occupied by a representative of the Galactic Order's most powerful member races. As Sarah was escorted into the chamber, she felt the weight of countless eyes upon her. The councillors regarded her with a mix of curiosity and suspicion, their expressions unreadable behind the facades of their alien features. At the center of the chamber, Professor Psylocke stood waiting, his tentacles twitching with nervous energy. When Sarah approached, he stepped forward, his voice booming across the hall. "Esteemed members of the Galactic Council," he began, "I have called you here today to address a grave threat to the stability and integrity of our civilization." He gestured towards Sarah, his black eyes narrowing. This human female, Sarah Chen, has demonstrated abilities that defy all logic and reason. Her intellect rivals that of our greatest scholars, and her physical prowess outmatches even our most skilled warriors. A low murmur rippled through the council, and Sarah felt a trickle of unease. Psylocke pressed on, his voice urgent. "I fear that this human anomaly represents a danger that we cannot ignore. What if she is merely the first of her kind, a harbinger of a wave of primitive, yet potent invaders from her homeworld? What secrets does her planet hold, and how might they be used to undermine the fragile balance of the galactic order?" The councillors exchanged troubled glances, their features etched with concern. One by one, they began to voice their own fears and suspicions, their questions rapid-fire and unforgiving. "How can we be certain she is not some kind of spy or infiltrator, sent to gather intelligence and sow discord? What if her kind possessed technological capabilities that could threaten our most advanced systems? Perhaps she is the vanguard of a larger invasion force, softening us up for a full-scale assault." Sarah felt her heart racing as the accusations mounted, her mind scrambling to formulate a response. Finally, when the barrage of questions began to subside, she stepped forward, her voice clear and unwavering. "Honourable members of the Galactic Council, I understand your concerns, but I assure you, I am no threat to your civilization. I am merely a student seeking to expand my knowledge and learn from the great wisdom of your people." She paused, meeting the gaze of the assembled counselors. "On my homeworld, we face many challenges that have forged us into a resilient, adaptable species. But we are not conquerors or invaders. We simply wish to coexist peacefully, to learn and grow alongside the greater galactic community." A Grell counselor leaned forward, his deep voice rumbling with skepticism. "And yet, you have demonstrated capabilities that surpass even our finest minds and warriors. Surely, you must see how this could be perceived as a threat." Sarah nodded solemnly. "I understand your concerns, Counselor. But I assure you, my abilities are not the result of any nefarious plot or hidden agenda. They are simply the product of my upbringing and the challenges I have overcome on my homeworld." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. "I am not here to challenge your authority or upset the balance of power in this galaxy. I am here to learn to grow and to hopefully forge connections that will benefit both our civilizations. All I ask is that you give me a chance to prove my sincerity." The counselors fell silent, their expressions unreadable as they considered Sarah's words. Silo fidgeted nervously, his tentacles twitching with unease. After what seemed like an eternity, the Grell counselor leaned back in his chair, his massive frame rumbling with a deep sigh. "Very well, human. You shall have your chance." Sarah felt a surge of relief, but the counselor raised a clawed hand, cutting off her response. "However, know this. Should you prove to be a threat to the Galactic Order in any way, we will not hesitate to take decisive action. The stakes are too high to allow for any mistakes." Sarah swallowed hard, her gaze unwavering. "I understand, Counselor. I will not let you down." As the counselors began to file out of the chamber, Xyloth approached Sarah, his tentacles curled tightly against his body. "Consider yourself fortunate, human," he growled. "The council has chosen to give you a chance. But mark my words, I will be watching you closely." Sarah nodded, her expression grim. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Professor." With that, she was escorted out of the chamber, her future at the Galactic Academy hanging by a thread. In the days that followed, Sarah's life at the Galactic Academy became a constant balancing act. On one hand, she was granted a measure of freedom, allowed to attend classes, access the Academy's resources, and even engage in casual conversation with her fellow students. But the omnipresent shadow of suspicion and scrutiny never left her. Tyloth and his cadre of professors hovered around her like a swarm of predatory insects, their beady eyes always watching, their probing questions ever present. Whenever Sarah entered a room, the chatter would hush, and the other students would regard her with a mix of awe and unease. Some avoided her altogether, while others would muster up the courage to approach, their curiosity warring with the fear of being associated with the human anomaly. Sarah tried her best to remain calm and focused, throwing herself into her studies with single-minded determination. She quickly rose to the top of her classes, her innate intellect and tireless work ethic leaving her peers in the dust. But the more she excelled, the more the weight of the Galactic Council's watchful gaze seemed to bear down upon her. One day, as Sarah was poring over a complex holographic display in the Academy's vast library, a familiar figure materialized beside her. She glanced up to find Siloth looming over her, his tentacles twitching with undisguised hostility. "Sarah Chen," the Novellian professor rumbled, his deep voice sending a shiver down her spine. "I see you are as diligent as ever in your studies." Sarah nodded wearily. "Professor Xyloth, how can I help you?" Siloth's eyes narrowed to slits. "Help me? No, my dear, the question is how you can help yourself. The Galactic Council has grown increasingly concerned about your presence here. They fear that your _exceptional abilities pose a threat to the stability of our civilization. He leaned closer, his tentacles curling menacingly. And I, for one, am inclined to agree with them. You may have fooled the Council with your pretty words, but I see the truth. You are a dangerous anomaly, a wild card that cannot be allowed to roam freely. Sarah felt a surge of indignation, but she forced herself to remain calm. Professor, I've done nothing to warrant such suspicion. I am simply a student, here to learn and expand my knowledge. Psyloth let out a derisive snort. A student, you say? No, you are far more than that. You possess powers that could topple empires, abilities that could unravel the very fabric of our society. And I, for one, will not stand idly by and allow that to happen. He straightened, his tentacles unfurling in a gesture of finality. The Council has agreed to a _conditional arrangement. You will be allowed to continue your studies, but under the watchful eye of a personal mentor, someone who can ensure that your abilities are properly channeled and controlled. Sarah felt her heart sink. A mentor. But oh, why me, of course? Ataroth interrupted, a cruel smile spreading across his features. After all, who better to keep you in line than the one who first exposed your true nature to the Galactic Council? He leaned in close, his voice dropping to a menacing whisper. Consider this your final warning, Sarah Chen. One toe out of line, and I will ensure that you are removed from this academy permanently. With that, the Novellian professor turned and strode away, leaving Sarah alone with a sinking feeling of dread. She gazed down at the holographic display, her mind racing with 1,000 conflicting thoughts. What had she gotten herself into? And how could she possibly navigate the treacherous waters of the Galactic Academy with Psyloth as her constant shadow and judge? As the weight of the Council's scrutiny and Psyloth's relentless suspicion bore down upon her, Sarah couldn't help but wonder if she had made a grave mistake in ever setting foot on this alien world. But deep within her, a spark of defiance flared to life. She was no mere child, no helpless pawn to be toyed with by these self-important academics. She was a warrior, a problem solver, a human, forged in the crucible of her homeworld's challenges. And if these aliens thought they could break her, they were sorely mistaken. With a renewed sense of determination, Sarah turned her attention back to the holographic display, her mind already at work formulating a plan to navigate this new and perilous landscape. Over the following months, Sarah's life at the Galactic Academy became a constant balancing act, a delicate dance between her thirst for knowledge and the ever-present shadow of suspicion that clung to her. With Professor Psyloth as her personal mentor, every step she took was scrutinized, every word she spoke analyzed for the slightest hint of deception. The Novellian professor hovered over her like a predatory bird, his black eyes glinting with a mixture of fascination and disdain. Yet, despite the weight of Psyloth's relentless scrutiny, Sarah refused to be cowed. She threw herself into her studies with a fierce determination, her brilliant mind absorbing knowledge at a pace that left even the most esteemed professors in awe. In the classroom, she excelled without effort, her solutions to complex problems flowing with a natural elegance that often left her peers and instructors speechless. And in the training grounds, her lithe frame danced with a grace and power that continued to defy the expectations of even the most seasoned galactic warriors. Slowly, the initial hostility and fear that had surrounded Sarah began to give way to a growing sense of grudging respect. The other students, once wary of the human anomaly, found themselves drawn to her quiet confidence and unwavering dedication. And even some of the professors, including the obstinate Ailoth, could not help but acknowledge the depth of her abilities. But as Sarah's reputation grew, so too did the intensity of the Galactic Council's watch. Scythoth reported her every move, his detailed logs scrutinized by the concerned representatives of the Galactic Order. And with each passing day, the weight of their scrutiny seemed to grow heavier, the threat of banishment, or worse, ever present. Then, one fateful day, everything changed. Sarah was summoned to the council chambers, her heart racing with a mixture of trepidation and resolve. As she stood before the assembled councillors, their expressions grim and unreadable, Thyloth stepped forward, his tentacles twisting with nervous energy. Esteemed members of the Galactic Council, the Novellian professor began, his voice laced with a rare note of uncertainty. I have uncovered something that requires your immediate attention. He gestured towards Sarah, his black eyes narrowing. This human, this _anomaly_, she has shown abilities that defy all logic and reason. But now, I fear, she has uncovered secrets that could threaten the very foundations of our civilization. The councillors murmured among themselves, their expressions darkening. Sarah felt a surge of dread, her mind racing to comprehend what Scythoth could have discovered. Professor Axyloth, a Rachian councillor, rumbled. What is the nature of this? _discovery_. Scythoth took a deep breath, his tentacles twitching. In my efforts to understand the extent of the human's abilities, I have tasked her with deciphering some of the most complex and enigmatic precursor artifacts in our possession. He paused, his gaze sweeping across the chamber. And she has succeeded. Not only has she solved the puzzles and riddles that have stumped our greatest scholars for millennia, but she has also unlocked secrets that could rewrite everything we know about the precursors and the very nature of our universe. A collective gasp rippled through the council, the councillors exchanging horrified glances. Sarah felt her heart pounding in her chest, her mind reeling with the implications of Scythoth's words. This cannot be. A Grell councillor growled, his clawed hands clenching into fists. The precursors were the most advanced civilization our galaxy has ever known. If what you say is true, then. He trailed off, his expression twisted with a mixture of fear and awe. Scythoth nodded gravely. Precisely. The human's discoveries call into question the very foundations of our society, our understanding of the cosmos itself. She has the power to destabilize the galactic order in ways we cannot even begin to fathom. The councillors fell silent, their faces etched with a range of emotions, fear, uncertainty, and a growing sense of dread. Finally, the Rachian councillor raised a hand, his voice resonating through the chamber. Sarah Chen, you stand accused of uncovering secrets that threaten the stability and integrity of the galactic order. How do you plead? Sarah swallowed hard, her gaze unwavering. Honourable councillors, I assure you, I have no desire to cause harm or disruption to your civilization. I am merely a student, driven by a thirst for knowledge and understanding. She took a deep breath, her eyes meeting the councillor's gaze one by one. But if what Professor Axyloth has discovered is true, then I believe it is our collective responsibility to uncover the full truth, no matter how unsettling it may be. The councillors exchanged troubled glances, their expressions unreadable. Sarah felt a surge of trepidation, her future once again hanging in the balance. What would the Galactic Council decide? And how would the revelation of her discoveries change the course of the galaxy forever? Zara felt the weight of the Galactic Council's gaze bearing down upon her, their expressions a mix of fear, uncertainty, and a reluctant, grudging respect. She took a deep breath, her mind racing as she formulated her response. "Honourable councillors," she began, her voice calm and measured, "I understand the gravity of the situation and the profound implications of what Professor Psyloth has uncovered. But I assure you, I have no desire to destabilize the galactic order or to cause harm to your civilization." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the assembled councillors. "My sole motivation has been, and always will be, to seek the truth, no matter how unsettling or disruptive it may be. The precursors were a race of immense power and complexity, and I believe it is our collective responsibility to understand them, not simply to preserve the status quo." A murmur of unease rippled through the council chamber, and Sarah could feel the tension in the air. The Rixian councillor leaned forward, his voice rumbling with a mix of curiosity and trepidation. "And what, exactly, have you discovered about the precursors, Sarah Chen? What secrets have you uncovered that could threaten the very foundations of our society?" Sarah hesitated, weighing her words carefully. "The precursors were not merely an advanced civilization, Councillor. They were a race that had unlocked the deepest mysteries of the universe, secrets that transcended the boundaries of our known reality." She took a deep breath, her expression grave. Their technology, their understanding of the cosmos, it was _beyond anything we can truly comprehend. And the artifacts I have deciphered suggest that they were on the cusp of unlocking even greater truths that could have forever altered the course of galactic history. The councillors exchanged troubled glances, their faces etched with a mix of fascination and fear. Psyloth, who had remained silent throughout Sarah's explanation, finally spoke up, his tentacles twitching with unease. "You see, councillors, this human holds knowledge that could topple empires, destroy civilizations. She is a threat, a dangerous anomaly that must be contained before she can cause irreparable harm." Sarah turned to face the Novellian professor, her eyes narrowing. "With respect, Professor Psyloth, I believe you are mistaken. My discoveries are not a weapon to be wielded, but a gift. A chance for us to expand our understanding of the universe and our place within it." She paused, her gaze sweeping across the chamber. "If we can unlock the full truth about the precursors, we may uncover secrets that could benefit all sentient life in the galaxy, advances in technology, in science, in our very conception of reality itself." The councillors fell silent, their expressions thoughtful. Finally, the Grail representative leaned forward, his deep voice rumbling with a note of grudging respect. "You speak with wisdom and conviction, Sarah Chen, and we cannot ignore the potential benefits that your discoveries may offer." He held up a clawed hand, forestalling Psyloth's protests. "However, the risks are also grave. The destabilization of the galactic order, the potential for catastrophic upheaval, these are not matters to be taken lightly." The Grell councillor paused, his gaze fixed on Sarah. "Therefore, we have decided that your research and discoveries will be placed under the strictest of supervision. You will work closely with a team of our most trusted scholars, who will ensure that your findings are properly vetted and disseminated in a controlled manner." Sarah felt a surge of relief, but the councillor's next words quickly doused that feeling. "And should any of your work be deemed a threat to the stability of the galactic order, we will not hesitate to take _decisive action. Is that understood?" Sarah nodded, her expression grave. "I understand, Councillor. I will do everything in my power to ensure that my discoveries are used for the betterment of all sentient life in the galaxy." As Sarah was escorted from the council chambers, Psyloth approached her, his tentacles curled tightly against his body. "This is not over, human," he growled, his voice laced with a mixture of grudging respect and lingering resentment. "I will be watching your every move, and the moment you step out of line, I will ensure that you are removed from this academy, and the galaxy, for good." Sarah met his gaze evenly, her expression unreadable. "I wouldn't have it any other way, Professor." With that, she turned and walked away, her mind already racing with the implications of her newfound responsibilities and the challenges that lay ahead.